Korea, a nation with a long and storied past, found itself at a crossroads in the aftermath of World War II. The once united peninsula became a focal point in the emerging Cold War. The Soviet Union occupied the north, installing a communist government led by Kim Il-sung. The United States supported the south, with Syngman Rhee at the helm. The 38th parallel, an arbitrary line drawn on a map, became the dividing line between two ideologically opposed states. Tensions simmered as both sides harbored aspirations of reunifying the peninsula under their own rule. Border clashes intensified, pushing the two Koreas closer to the brink of war. The stage was set for a conflict that would draw in superpowers and leave a lasting impact on the international order. The Korean War, often called the Forgotten War, would become a defining chapter in the Cold War narrative. The uneasy peace on the Korean peninsula was shattered in the early hours of June 25, 1950. North Korean forces, armed with Soviet tanks and artillery, launched a surprise attack across the 38th parallel. Seoul, the capital of South Korea, fell to the invaders within days. The North Korean People's Army, fueled by promises of a swift and decisive victory, pushed deep into South Korean territory. The South Korean army, ill-prepared for the onslaught, fought valiantly but was quickly overwhelmed. The conflict had begun, and the world watched with bated breath. The United States, caught off guard by the invasion, quickly condemned the attack as an act of communist aggression. President Harry S. Truman, determined to contain the spread of communism, vowed to aid the South Korean people. The invasion of South Korea presented President Truman with a defining moment in his presidency. The sudden and aggressive move by North Korean forces across the 38th parallel was not just a regional skirmish, but a significant escalation in the global struggle between democracy and communism. Truman, who had already faced numerous challenges during his time in office, now had to make a critical decision that would shape the future of international relations and America's role on the world stage. With memories of World War II still fresh in the minds of the American people, Truman sought to avoid another global conflict. The horrors of the previous war were still vivid, and the nation was weary of further bloodshed. Yet the threat of communist expansion could not be ignored. The American public, while cautious, understood the stakes involved. The fear of communism spreading across Asia and potentially beyond was a real and present danger that needed to be addressed. However, he also recognized the need to confront communist expansionism. The post-war world was rapidly dividing into two camps, the democratic West and the communist East. Truman and his advisors believed that failing to act in Korea could embolden communist movements elsewhere, leading to a domino effect that might destabilize entire regions. The policy of containment, which aimed to prevent the spread of communism, was now being put to the test. Truman, with the support of the United Nations Security Council, committed American forces to the defense of South Korea. This was a significant move, as it marked one of the first major military actions taken by the UN in its history. The international community, recognizing the threat posed by the North Korean invasion, rallied behind the United States. This collective effort was seen as a necessary step to maintain global peace and security. The United States, along with other UN member states, would provide military assistance to repel the North Korean invasion. This coalition of forces represented a united front against aggression and tyranny. American soldiers, many of whom had recently returned from the battlefields of World War II, were once again called to serve. The sense of duty and commitment to defending freedom was palpable among the troops. America's entry into the Korean War marked a pivotal moment in the Cold War, transforming a regional conflict into a proxy war between superpowers. The Korean Peninsula became the latest battleground in the ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Each side sought to assert its dominance and influence, making Korea a critical front in the broader Cold War context. The decisions made here would have far-reaching implications for international politics and the balance of power. American troops, many of whom had recently fought in World War II, were deployed to Korea. These soldiers, seasoned by the brutal experiences of the previous war, brought with them a wealth of knowledge and resilience. Their presence in Korea was a testament to America's resolve to stand against aggression and uphold democratic values. The transition from one conflict to another was swift, and the soldiers had to quickly adapt to the new challenges posed by the Korean terrain and climate. They were joined by soldiers from other nations, forming a UN command under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur, a highly respected and experienced military leader, was tasked with coordinating the multinational forces. His strategic acumen and leadership were crucial in organizing the defense and counteroffensive operations. The collaboration among the UN member states showcased the power of international unity in the face of common threats. The stage was set for a clash of ideologies on the battlefields of Korea. The conflict would test the resolve and capabilities of both sides, with each battle serving as a microcosm of the larger struggle between communism and democracy. The Korean War, though often overshadowed by other events in history, remains a significant chapter in the story of the Cold War, highlighting the complexities and consequences of global power dynamics. Section 4. The UN responds, a global coalition forms. The United Nations Security Council, condemning the North Korean invasion, passed a resolution authorizing the use of force to repel the aggressors. This marked a significant moment in UN history as it was the first time the organization had authorized military action to enforce international peace and security. Countries from around the world, including Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and Turkey, answered the UN's call. These nations, contributing troops, medical personnel and supplies, demonstrated a commitment to collective security and a willingness to confront communist aggression. The Korean War became a truly international conflict. The arrival of UN forces, though initially small in number, provided a much-needed morale boost to the beleaguered South Korean forces. The conflict had now evolved into a global struggle, with the fate of Korea hanging in the balance. Section 5, Pusan Perimeter, holding the line against the tide. As North Korean forces advanced relentlessly southward, UN and South Korean troops found themselves pushed back to a small pocket of territory in the southeastern corner of the Korean peninsula. The situation was dire, with the enemy forces showing no signs of slowing down. The soldiers knew that if they failed to hold this line, the entire peninsula could fall into enemy hands. This defensive line, known as the Pusan Perimeter, became a desperate stand against the North Korean onslaught. The perimeter stretched over 140 miles, encompassing a rugged terrain that included mountains, rivers, and urban areas. Every inch of this line was fiercely contested, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Outnumbered and outgunned, UN forces under the leadership of General Walker fought valiantly to hold the line. General Walker's leadership was instrumental in maintaining the morale and fighting spirit of the troops. He was often seen on the front lines, encouraging his men and coordinating defensive strategies. His presence was a beacon of hope in those dark days. The port of Pusan, a vital lifeline for supplies and reinforcements, became a symbol of UN resistance. Supplies, ammunition, and fresh troops poured into the port, bolstering the defenses and providing much-needed relief to the weary soldiers. The logistical efforts to keep the port operational under constant threat were nothing short of heroic. The fate of the war, it seemed, hinged on the ability of the defenders to hold on to this shrinking perimeter. The soldiers knew that their stand at Pusan was not just a battle for territory, but a battle for the future of South Korea. The stakes were incredibly high, and the pressure was immense. Despite suffering heavy casualties, UN forces, bolstered by air and naval support, managed to repel repeated North Korean attacks. The air support provided crucial bombing runs that disrupted enemy supply lines and troop movements, while naval forces offered artillery support and protected the coastline. This combined arms approach was key to the defense's success. The Pusan perimeter held, buying valuable time for a daring counteroffensive that would alter the course of the war. The successful defense of the perimeter was a turning point, demonstrating the resilience and determination of the UN and South Korean forces. It set the stage for future operations that would eventually push the North Korean forces back and change the dynamics of the conflict. Section 6. Inchon Landing, turning the tide of war. With the Pusan perimeter holding firm, the United Nations forces had managed to create a defensive stronghold in the southeastern corner of the Korean peninsula. This was a critical moment, as the North Korean forces had been pushing relentlessly southward, threatening to overrun the entire peninsula. The Pusan perimeter became a symbol of resistance and determination, a last bastion against the advancing enemy. General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of UN forces, recognized the need for a bold and decisive action to break the stalemate. He devised a daring plan to outmaneuver the North Koreans and change the course of the war. MacArthur's vision was not just to defend but to take the offensive, to strike at the heart of the enemy's supply and communication lines. He proposed an amphibious landing at Inchon, a strategically vital port city located far behind enemy lines. Inchon was chosen for its geographical significance. Capturing it would allow UN forces to cut off North Korean supply routes and isolate their troops in the south. However, the plan was fraught with risks. The tides at Inchon were notoriously unpredictable and the terrain was challenging, with mudflats and seawalls that could hinder the landing. The Inchon landing, considered a risky gamble due to its challenging tides and terrain, caught the North Koreans completely by surprise. The element of surprise was crucial. The North Korean forces were unprepared for an attack from this direction. The difficult conditions did not deter the determined UN forces, who executed the landing with precision and bravery. UN forces, spearheaded by the US X-Corps, stormed ashore on September 15, 1950, and quickly secured the city. The operation was a remarkable success, demonstrating the effectiveness of combined arms and joint operations. The rapid capture of Inchon allowed UN forces to establish a strong foothold and begin their advance inland. The Inchon landing, a brilliant strategic masterstroke, cut the North Korean supply lines and forced them into a hasty retreat. The disruption of their logistics and communications severely weakened the North Korean army's ability to sustain their offensive. This turning point in the war showcased the importance of strategic planning and the element of surprise in military operations. The tide of the war had turned. The successful landing at Inchon not only boosted the morale of UN and South Korean forces, but also marked the beginning of a series of offensives that would push the North Korean army back. The victory at Inchon was celebrated as a pivotal moment, a testament to the courage and determination of the soldiers involved. UN and South Korean forces, now on the offensive, pushed northward, liberating Seoul and driving the North Korean army back towards the 38th parallel. The recapture of Seoul was a significant achievement, symbolizing the resilience and fighting spirit of the UN coalition. The advance continued, with battles raging near the 38th parallel as both sides vied for control. Victory seemed within reach, but the war was far from over. The conflict would continue to seesaw, with both sides experiencing victories and setbacks. The Inchon landing, however, remained a defining moment, a demonstration of strategic brilliance and the indomitable will of the UN forces. The soldiers, hopeful and resolute, prepared for the next phase of the war, knowing that the path to peace would be long and arduous.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwende.